Welcome one, welcome all. You know, Minot has seen many local athletes go on to do great things, and today we've got a guest who's from just over the border and has made his mark on all levels of hockey. He continues to do so behind the bench at Mesa Arena. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Magic City Hoagies. MCH is open for delivery and takeout, and they've got what you need for free kids' meals through the end of the 2019-20 school year. Look out for the family meals to come. You might think I'm set in my Philly cheesesteak ways, and while you're not totally wrong, I do my best to not be basic by picking up a Nola Muffaletta, hailing from one of my favorite vacation spots, New Orleans. Either that or the TKO knockout before watching Floyd Mayweather come back yet again, or my guy Terrence Crawford undefeated out of Omaha. That, and you can't go wrong with our first guest Larry McFall's favorite, the Big Beaver. Magic City Hoagies wants Minot to stay strong, stay positive, and thanks you for your continued support. Just like Christine at Hoagies, we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear as the Ben Bar Sports Podcast keeps rolling. Message the Facebook page with your show ideas and for your small business free read just like this one. And now, my first chance to live up to Spittin' Chicklets. Joining me now is Minotauros head coach and GM Marty Murray. Coach, first of all, want to go in the Wayback Machine right off the bat for you. You were able to play major junior hockey to start a really great junior career for you. What went into being able to play at that level? Because there's a lot of Canadian kids that will go into several different levels, but major junior is kind of like the big time for that age group.
Yeah, everybody grows up dreaming of playing the NHL when you're a little tyke and a young kid playing hockey. But the first step of that was major junior, and for me, it was the Western Hockey League. Back then in the late '80s, early '90s, college wasn't overly popular. Growing up in rural Manitoba, it was to play in the Western Hockey League, and for me. The Brandon Wheat Kings were 2 hours away from my hometown, and ironically, I never started there. I was actually listed by the Spokane Chiefs from Spokane, Washington, in that league, and I was traded to Brandon in a multiplayer trade from Spokane when I was 15. The year before, I was able to start playing. So it kind of looked like I was going to be a Spokane Chief for a long time, but it worked out where I was traded to Brandon. Kind of my hometown, so it was nice. It was 2 hours away from my hometown growing up, and obviously enabled my parents to get there and watch. I think they probably missed 4 or 5 games in the 4 years I was there.
Most sports in the United States, it's all about recruiting at that age, but did it ever feel weird to you when you were growing up to be scouted enough to be drafted into a junior team?
It was actually different back then, Ben. It was a different format. Now they have the draft, which is basically like the NHL draft or the NFL draft. It's the worst team starts and then it goes on from there. But back then they didn't have a draft. What they did was every team was allowed to have 50 players on their protected list, and as soon as you turn 13, you're eligible to go on one of those lists. So right when I turned 13, I think at the strike of midnight, Spokane put me on their list, and I think the 13-year-olds took up 3 spots on that list. The 14s took up 2, and the 15s took up 1. So it wasn't overly common to have too many 13-year-olds, I guess on those lists. But it was kind of a way they did it back then. And then I think the next year, we were the last year of my class was the last year of doing it that way, and then they went to a draft after that, and it's been like that since.
I didn't mean to date you with a different format, but this question will definitely date you, Marty. How were the Wheat Kings able to turn things around from the 91 to 92 season to 92 to 93 record 62 points?
Well, that was a Canadian Hockey League record, and I don't know if it still stands or not, but for the longest time that was a Canadian Hockey League record as far as the biggest turnaround in one season. And, that first year was pretty much a disaster. I was 16 years old. You're moving away from home for the first time and playing against men, virtually 19, 20-year-old men that are, quite a few of them drafted the NHL. So it was a real eye-opener for me personally. There was lots of tough nights. I think I came in as a pretty highly regarded prospect, and it was a battle. And I remember thinking on many occasions, am I ready for this? And stuck with it. And the one good part of having such a bad team was younger guys got to play a lot. And, our general manager and coach, Kelly McCrimmon, who now is the general manager of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, obviously a pretty smart hockey guy. He ended up making a lot of trades that year, which brought in some youth. And we obviously struggled that first year, but no doubt we gained that experience in year one, had some positive things down the stretch in that 16-year-old year, and then built off those going into the 17-year-old year. And like I said, or you said, I think we had a 62-point swing in wins losses. So it was pretty fun being a part of that process and growing up with it. And we've made some pretty tight relationships just because we went through so much together.
Obviously, you guys need to put the work in to have that kind of a fast development, but just being able to be on the ice that early as a junior player, how much did that experience really kind of help over the years at the Canadian major junior level?
No question. I mean, as tough as it was being on a losing team, we won 11 games, I think, out of 72 that year. It was a grind, but looking back on it, I took advantage of a situation, I guess. We went with the youth movement, and our young players got to play a lot more and play in important situations. And I think that was the first time as a learning lesson in hockey, you're given an opportunity, you got to take advantage of it. And I was able to start having success in the second half of that year, of my 16-year-old year, and really came into my second year with a lot of confidence.
You did have an opportunity to advance to the WHL final in 94-95. Unfortunately for you guys, you couldn't get it done. But how much did that year maybe lay the foundation for the next year when the Wheat Kings won the whole thing in the WHL?
Well, I think, I think, honestly, that first year when we made that huge jump, I just think the culture of the organization changed. We had a lot of players in there that were highly regarded and had 4 really memorable years there, especially the last 3 when we had a lot of success on the ice. And there's no question that, a lot of those guys that won the championships in 95, 96 were on our team in 94, 95, and obviously gained from that experience. And, it was fun. I enjoyed every second of it. We got to play in the Memorial Cup that year, even though we lost in the finals to Kamloops because they were hosting. So we were, granted the host slot in that Memorial Cup. And for any hockey fans, we had a heck of a series against Kamloops, and there's a lot of names on there that hockey people recognize, and Jerome McGinley and Shane Doan and Darcy Tucker and Nolan Baumgartner and Adam Kelly, Jason Strudwick. They probably had a dozen players that went on to play a long time in the NHL, and we had a good team too, with the likes of Wade Redden and Brian McCabe on our back end, and Peter Schaefer up front, Chris Dingman. We had a lot of firepower too, so it was a real good series. They ended up winning the Memorial Cup, but we were right there. And, I'd love to go back and try that again sometime.
Can you talk a little bit about what was entailed in that organizational culture change that you mentioned with the 62-pointer? Yeah,
I think it starts with the leadership in Kelly McCrimmon. Anybody that follows hockey, Kelly was the owner, coach at certain times, but general manager for 20 plus years in Brandon. He built it. I mean, he's a guy that he's a hockey genius. I think before he left to go to the NHL, I think a lot of WHL general manager were hesitant to make trades with him, but just because he made them look like fools almost. He's that good at his craft. And we had a young coach in Brandon, Bobby Lowe's, who had a lot of energy. He taught us not only how to play on the ice, but taught us a strong work ethic, how to conduct ourselves. Just the culture of it with those two in particular, was the reason we were able to make the strides we did in a short period of time.
You already talked about the really good opposition that you played in the WHL final, and another team that was just stacked was your group that you had in the 1995 World Junior Championship. Of course, we have Marty Murray, but we have a bunch of guys like Jason Allison, Brian McCabe, Eric Dazé, Alex Daig, Jeff Friesen, Ryan Smith. I'm going on with Wade Redden, Darcy Tucker. Like you said, Ed Jovanovski, and even Dan Cloutier had a lot of good years in Vancouver. What were some of your best memories of being on that gold medal team?
Well, I guess let me back up first. I had the opportunity to play in two. I played in the year before too as a 18-year-old, and just completely two different scenarios. The first year we were, I think, ranked 6th going into the World Junior Championship. We had a lot of guys that were eligible, but they made the NHL teams, like Chris Pronger, like Paul Correa, Rob Niedermeyer. There was probably 6 or 7 guys that would have been on that team if they didn't make their NHL club. So, we kind of went into there with a lot of no names, so to speak. And like I said, we were ranked 6th, out of 8 teams or 9 teams or whatever it was going into that tournament. And we just really gelled together as a group. And I think for me, that was the first time that, you understand, I think, what it takes to win and to accept your role. We all come from being almost the guy on our junior teams to playing every power play and every important situation. But obviously when you have 22, 23 guys from across the country that play that same role, something's got to give. So everybody really bought into their role. It was a different format back then. It wasn't a semifinal gold medal game. It was a round robin, so everybody played 7 games, and whoever had the most points at the end of the 7 games won the gold medal. So Sweden was 6-0 going into our last game against them, and we were 5-0-1. So they just needed a tie. We needed an outright win, and we ended up sneaking away with one. They had a power play in the last minute of the game. We were up by 1, and they needed to score just 6-on-4. I'll never forget it to this day. A backdoor pass. It would look like it was going to be a tap in for the Swede, and Aaron Gavey with a great stick deflected the puck in the corner. We went down and scored, made it 6-4, and it was basically over. And such a fine line between winning and losing. We were literally, they say it's a game of inches. We were literally a half an inch away from taking the silver. So that was the first experience. The tournament was in Czech Republic. And then the following year in 94, 95 was in Red Deer, Alberta. And then some games in Calgary, Edmonton. And the big news that year, that was the year of the NHL lockout. So there's no NHL going on. That was the only hockey going on in North America. And a lot of eyes on us. And it's maybe not as popular, the World Juniors down in the States, but up north in Canada, it's a pretty big deal. And as fun as it was to play in that environment, there was a lot of pressure too. We had probably 6-7 guys that had already played a full year in the NHL and still had eligibility. So there's a lot of pressure. We were expected to win, and the country in general was hungry for hockey. Like I said, we played, I think that was the first taste they played World Juniors in NHL venues. We played in the Calgary Saddle Dome and then the Edmonton Coliseum. We sold out 20,000 people in both those games. And we ended up being the first Canadian team to go 7-0, winning a gold medal. It was, it probably wasn't as easy as maybe a record would suggest, but at the same time, it was a lot of pressure, it was a lot of fun, and just being in that atmosphere of, sellout crowds every night and playing with, those guys you mentioned that went on to have outstanding NHL careers was definitely a highlight of my career.
When you were playing in that World Junior Championship in 95, who were the guys on that really deep list of great players that you had the most chemistry with when you were playing?
Jason Allison and I played together on a line. Jason had a long NHL career. He had some real good years in Washington and Toronto. Big body, always took heat for not being a good skater, but he had the softest hands and he could make plays. One of those guys that could almost slow the game down a little bit, and I was kind of the little water bug out there. So we really complemented each other well. I think we tied in points for the lead or the tournament lead in scoring, but we really clicked. And we were so deep. At times it wasn't almost fair.
And the thing is, I kind of wanted to save that for like the end of the World Junior discussion, is because obviously when you're in an international tournament, everybody kind of tries to buy in even more for like the common goal of a gold medal. But still, for you to play on a team with that kind of a list of players and to lead them in scoring, how much do you hang your hat on that?
Well, you don't really think about it when you're going through it, to be honest with you. Your focus is to do whatever you can to help your country win a championship. And anytime you get an opportunity to wear that, in our case, a maple leaf across our chest. It's a big deal, especially in the game of hockey. So you want to represent your country in the best way you can. And, I had some good fortune that week. I was put in a good situation from the coaching staff as far as playing power play and stuff like that. And I think, playing on the team the previous year kind of gives you a better opportunity for stuff like that. But, just an overall great experience and something that'll live with me forever.
Feels like whenever you follow like a Team Canada at whatever level, whether it's World Juniors or the Olympics, that the head coach and the brain trust that puts the roster together has an embarrassment of riches to choose from. So, it's kind of, how do you separate yourself? Why did you earn that ice time against those guys, do you think?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think, the head coach was Don Hay. Don coached in the Western Hockey League in Kamloops. So I think there's some, he's familiar with my game. And I think I got off to a good start in the tournament too. So that, gave me the ability to continue to be thrown on the ice, I guess. So, I think helping, it helped obviously playing the year before and kind of being a veteran on the team. But, I was put in a good situation, took advantage of it, and like I said, those are definitely a couple of my most prized memories in my junior hockey career.
Yes, and you dated back also for the 94 team before we discussed that 95, and I wanted to even head back to the 93 experience of being drafted by the Flames. What was draft day like for you?
Well, draft day was my high school graduation, believe it or not, so I never went to the draft. I wasn't rated by NHL Central Scouting, and I talked to a few teams leading up to the draft, but I didn't know if I was going to get drafted. I was a small man playing a big man's game at the time. I was 5'9", 160 pounds, and at that time it was a big man's game, so I didn't know if I was going to get drafted. And, it's kind of a funny story leading up to the draft. About 2 months before, we were playing in Brandon, and I went out to dinner with a Calgary Flames scout after the game, and we sat down and had a nice meal. And I noticed he was carrying a duffel bag with him, and we ate. And he goes, "Marty, do you mind following me to the bathroom?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess."
It's an odd request, okay.
As odd as it was, and so we walked into the bathroom with his duffel bag in his hand, and sure enough, he pulled out a bathroom scale out of it, and it made me stand on the bathroom scale right in the restaurant to see exactly what I weighed with his own eyes. I think a lot of times when you go off the programs and stuff, those numbers are skewed a little bit, and he wanted to see it with his own eyes. So that was kind of a funny story I always tell leading up to my draft. But draft day itself, getting back to that, was my high school graduation. Through the process of going through grad, and I got a call mid-afternoon. Of course, there's no cell phones or no social media to follow things back then. I got a call from Kelly McCrimmon, who was our general manager in Brandon at the time. Called my folks home and let me know Calgary picked me in the 4th round of the draft. So that made that day extra special. Obviously, would have been nice to be there, but in saying that, having your high school graduation to get drafted in the NHL the same day was a pretty special day.
Were you anxious about going through the motions of the high school ceremony, or just your NHL future on that day?
It was, I think, just all such a blur. Probably for me, I think the NHL and getting drafted by Calgary was probably bigger, and that was on my mind more than getting that diploma. And I don't want to take anything away from that. But I was a hockey nut growing up. I started skating when I was 2 years old, and the only thing I ever wanted to do was be an NHL hockey player. So to get that phone call on draft day and say I got drafted by the Calgary Flames was pretty special.
You heard it from Coach Murray. Just stay in school, kids. That's for sure. And what was that process of being scouted to and maybe talking to some NHL teams? Did you feel like Calgary was going to be that team from an early outset, or just whoever was going to be was going to be?
It's a little different. It's a lot different back then than it is now. They bring guys in. You got the fitness testing. You have the individual interviews. And I think for the high end guys, the guys probably going in the 1st round or the top 15 picks would go in early to the draft and have those interviews with respective teams. But for us guys, it was just kind of maybe a few phone calls leading up to the draft, getting to know us a little bit. Obviously, talking to our coaches from our junior team. I had an agent at the time, so he kept me informed of, maybe some teams that call. But completely different than it is now. I mean, they bring you in and they go up and down every sprint to your body to make sure everything's intact and on the mental side of it, there's a lot of tough questions and it's they're obviously making a big investment in you and they want to make sure they get it right.
Now, you weren't sure if you were going to be drafted. You end up being drafted, so I'm assuming that even if you weren't, you probably would have had some kind of camp experience. My point being, you were around NHL caliber guys from your early junior days all the way up to still like getting into the show. And despite all that experience already with playing with talented hockey players, did you still have that like welcome to the NHL moment when you were first getting a couple of games with the big club in Calgary? Like, was it just playing with like a bunch of mid-30-year-olds or just some guys just giving you crap in the locker room or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a few funny stories, and I think my first awe moment in the NHL was when I got drafted. I went to Flames main camp that year. I was 18 years old and pretty green, and you walk into the locker room and there's Joe Nieuwendyk and Darren Fleury and Gary Roberts and Mike Vernon, Gary Suter. I mean, the list goes on and on. They were pretty stacked back then with a lot of really good hockey players. And it's amazing. Like, I'll always remember a guy like Joe Nieuwendyk. He's the captain of the hockey team. And, him grabbing 3 or 4 of us after the first practice as 18-year-olds and taking us out to dinner and stuff like that. And, I think that kind of relieved a little pressure and made you understand these guys are human too. I mean, we grew up watching them on TV, but at the end of the day, I'm obviously a little biased, but hockey players are generally pretty good guys, and I got a first-hand taste of that, my first camp. And then the other moment was my first exhibition game. They used to call it the red-white game, where Calgary would play split up into split squads. And at the time, Dave King was the head coach, and Dave was a Hockey Canada guy coaching the Olympics and stuff, and he wasn't a big guy as far as fighting. So he implemented a no-fight rule in training camp that first year. And we went through 2 or 3 days of training camp. There was no fights, and then on the third day, there's a pretty good scrap in a scrimmage. So there's a fight between a veteran player, Paul Cruz. He was kind of established himself as a kind of a middle heavyweight in the NHL, and he had a year under his belt. And this young player from the Western Hockey League came in, and towards the end of the scrimmage on the second or third day, they went at it, and the younger guy from the Western Hockey League got the better of him, blacked in Cruz's eye. So obviously that didn't sit very well. I mean, guys are trying to hang on to their jobs and protect their jobs and didn't want anybody to come in and steal it, right? So the next day was the inter-squad game, the red-white game, and it's completely open to the fan base. And, usually play in a smaller venue, but it's packed with 4,000 or 5,000 people. And again, a no-fight rule in this game as well. And, the coaching staff knew that this veteran wanted a little revenge on the young guy that kind of got the better of him round one. And to avoid it kind of being a bit of a gong show and being about fighting, they ended up putting them on the same team, which was my team. So we're just starting the game. We're doing warm-ups, and at the end of warm-ups, they do the one guy passes in the corner, and everybody's kind of in a half moon or semicircle and just taking shots on the net. And sure enough, we're doing that and look over, and those two are fighting on the same team in warm-ups, right in the middle of the slot. And I remember Calgary's head coach come over the plexiglass, and his face was about as red as a tomato, yelling at them to knock it off. And I think that was another story that I always remember, my first NHL training camp experience, and I still tell that one to this day.
That's like the slap shot, like before the anthem when they have like blood coming out of their ears on the blue line by the end of it.
100%. It was a real-life slap shot.
I'm listening to the song, okay? Oh, man, classic. Did you hate the no-fighting rule? What was your take on that?
Well, for me, in training camp, I knew that it probably wasn't going to be a fight, so it didn't really bother me. And, the world of hockey, I mean, everybody's pretty honest. Unless you do something dumb, there's guys that'll fight and guys that, are more skilled. And, so you kind of write your own story in that regard. Obviously, there's going to be times when you lose your cool and stuff. And I probably only had about, probably 8 10 fights over my career from junior to pro. But it's an emotional game, and I think that having fighting in hockey, I think first of all the fans really like it, and I think as long as there's two willing combatants and sticking up for their teammates, I think it's part of the game. But it's definitely changed over the last probably 15 years.
I know it's this is mid '90s and we're up to 2020 now, but just with respect to this Minot kid, Mason Morelli, he's in the Flames system right now. Just he might be coming up kind of the same steps that you were. What was it like just playing in Calgary overall that he might experience?
Well, it's a hockey town. I think those Canadian hockey cities are very, very passionate. I think that they love their hockey team, and there is pressure. I think there's pressure to win and do well in those environments just because that's kind of the big show in town. And some other markets I played in Carolina where college basketball and things like that are probably more popular. So you maybe weren't recognized walking around town as much as a place like Calgary, but it's a hockey town through and through. They're kind of a blue collar, hard working town, and they expect out of that other hockey team. And get back to Mason, just a great story. First of all, for a great kid, getting that opportunity to play in Calgary's system. I know he was up and down a little bit this year, but really I think finished strong. And unfortunately, the season ended the way it did. But Mason's really established himself as a good all around hockey player. He really works at his craft, and I'd love to see him continue to get the opportunity at not only the American Hockey League level, but get a shot at the NHL level as well.
When you continued your professional career, you had a couple of stops overseas. You were in Austria and Germany from '98 to 2000, Germany in '05-06, and '07-08 Switzerland. What were some of the memorable times about just like seeing the world as a pro hockey player? And for each stop, I mean, what were the reasons of being connected to that team and country specifically?
Well, the first time I went over, I was 23. I signed a 3-year contract with Calgary out of junior and spent most of the time in the American Hockey League in St. John, New Brunswick, and had 3 pretty successful seasons there. But I think I felt like the writing was on the wall there. They kind of wanted me to be like a captain in the minor league team and stuff like that. And at the time, like I said, I was only 23 years old and wasn't ready to assume that role yet. Andy Murray is a distant relative of mine, and Andy is the head coach at Western Michigan University right now, but coached the Canadian Olympic teams. He coached in the NHL a long time, and he really I've known him since I've been 8 years old, and he kind of took me under my wing and said, Marty, there's a lot of good opportunities in Europe. I mean, you're a smaller guy, and at the time it was kind of a big man's game. It was hard for a 5'9" guy to kind of carve his way into the NHL at the time. He said, there's some good opportunities over in Europe, and you might want to check this out. So I talked to him quite a bit over the course of the summer, and ended up landing and making the commitment to go to Austria and play for a good friend of his in Ron Kennedy. It was a great experience. It was certainly odd. We take for granted nowadays with FaceTime and the internet, everything. You can have everything at your fingertips. But I remember getting off the plane in Villach, Austria, and looking around and going, what are we doing? And I think it was 2 weeks before we had even have communication with our families back home. The telephones weren't hooked up, so there was a lot of things that you just take for granted living in North America and as well. In today's technology, that you have everything at your fingertips. So that was a real tough learning curve, and getting thrown right into their culture in Austria. Unfortunately, I had my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. We did it together, so we ended up enjoying that season in Austria and doing really well. We ended up winning the whole championship, and then the following year, under Andy's guidance again, I decided to go to Cologne, Germany. It was a much bigger market. Obviously you got to look at things like salary and stuff like that. So it was a better opportunity in every way. So we went there. Myself and my line mate from Austria went there and played a year in Cologne, Germany, and beautiful city. I mean, an NHL rink seated 20,000 people. It was just like an NHL facility, and had a real good year there. We lost in the final that year, and that was the year the NHL went from 26 to 30 teams, and I was 25 at the time. And I had the decision to make: do I continue to try my hat at Europe and just have you can make a good living over there. You see a lot of the world that you maybe wouldn't expect to see. For me, there's kind of that fire burning in my belly that, hey, along with 4 new teams, there's 100 more jobs up for grabs, right? So I didn't want to be 45 years old and wish that I'd give this one more shot. So I knew Europe would always be there for me. I kind of established myself up there over a couple of years, and I knew that opportunity would always be there, but perhaps the NHL wouldn't. And so I decided to go back. Calgary still owned my rights under the free agency rules. They still owned my rights. So I went back to Calgary's organization, spent the year, other than 7 or 8 games in the minors. We ended up winning the Calder Cup that year. I had a real solid season. And then after that, I was a free agent and signed in Philadelphia, a 2-way contract. And you're a Philly guy, with the NHL team and the AHL team are under one roof, or used to be anyway. The Phantoms in Philadelphia and the Flyers are both based in Philly. So that appealed to me. I ended up signing a 1-year deal there and took advantage of an injury 2 games into the season and was able to stay up for 4 years and kind of had a weird career path after that. I remember, a lot of people saying, well, once you decide to go over to Europe once, you're there for good. It's hard to come back. And I definitely proved that theory wrong because I was back and forth probably 2 or 3 times throughout my career. And, wild ride, and I enjoyed every step of it.
What made Philadelphia a good spot for you more than once throughout your career, signing back there after some lockouts?
Yeah, so, like I said, I was able to carve a couple years out there with the Flyers, and I just loved it. I mean, their fan base is incredible. If things are going well, they love you. If they're not going so well, you'll get booed off the ice. But to me, I kind of like that. I think, we as athletes, and, earning a pretty decent buck, I think it's not too much that, asked to work hard and give your best. So the Flyer fans, the Philadelphia fans expect that, and I enjoyed it. And got to know some people. Ron Hextall, had a real good relationship with him. Bobby Clark was a GM, I had 2 pretty solid seasons there, and then I ended up signing. Went over to Europe. I actually, during the lockout in 04-05, I tore my knee. I tore my ACL in a training incident, and that was probably the worst thing that could happen to me, especially being 5'9". I think I was probably 27, 28 at the time, and blew up my knee, and I definitely lost half a step. When you're 5'9", 175 pounds, trying to play against the big boys, half a step is a lot. But anyways, I after the lockout, I went back over to Europe to Germany, played there a year, got healthy, got my knee back close to being what it was, and then the Flyers signed me to a 1-year contract there again, it crazy, but I ended up getting sent down and then called back up, and then LA picked me up on waivers, and that was kind of Ron Hextall too, who was in Philly. Ron had moved over to LA at the time, so he kind of was behind that and spent a little bit of time in LA, but I think looking back on it, I was probably brought in to kind of help the younger players along. They, if you look back on the roster in Manchester, they had a lot of really good young players coming along that ended up winning a couple Stanley Cups for them. And I was kind of the older guy who was the captain of the team, and my role in the whole thing was to try to help these guys become better pros. And so I kind of relished that role, and I'm thankful for a group of people that give me opportunities along the way. Ron Hextall being one of them.
Yeah, I was thinking about doubling back to just that role of the minor league captain, but you kind of just got into that. Also, you mentioned like the coach that knew of you and got you over to play for him in Europe, Kennedy. Obviously, not all the coaches in the European leagues are European guys. So, from the coaching level, what do potential coaches see in the European landscape compared to players?
Well, I think every team I played over there 4 years, we had North American coaches. So I think that starting from the World Juniors and going through junior with the Brown and Wheat Kings and stuff, I think that you get known a little bit, and I think that these guys were familiar with me, and having somebody like Andy Murray that's well respected in my corner helped me out along the way. I think that he was able to to help the process along. So I think that it's different. There's a lot of pressure on imports over there, depending on what country you're in. In Germany, we were allowed 11 imports, non-German. So the majority of those guys were Canadian and American. So we had a real fun group. It was a tight-knit group, and then I went to Switzerland a year, and we were only allowed 3 imports. And there's a lot of heat on the imports. If you lose a game 3-2 and you have a goal and assist, well, it's still the imports' fault. They didn't get it done, and there's a lot of pressure on the imports to produce and perform. And that's something that I learned right away. Is whatever you do, if you don't get the job done, there's the imports are usually first in line as far as what's going wrong. And I remember one night in Switzerland, we were playing on the road, and I played in Lugano, Switzerland, and Lugano's a pretty hot hockey bed there, and they expected to have winning teams every year. We were struggling. We were probably just about 500, and I think we were on like a 3 or 4 game losing streak, and we were playing in Lausanne, and it was about 3 hours down the road. And in Europe, they kind of have that soccer hooligan mentality, the fan base, so on the road, they'd always take a fan bus behind our bus, and we rolled into Lausanne and played a game, and we lost 9-4. It was ugly. Everything they shot went in, and we just got the score run up on us. So we're driving home back to Lugano, a 3-hour trip. But granted, this fan bus had been drinking and partying for probably 7 or 8 hours, so I think they were feeling no pain. And on the way home, we used to drive in those double-decker buses in Europe, and the president of the bus or of the hockey team gets on the loudspeaker, the microphone on the bus, and he's talking in broken English, and he says, I just want to let you know that the fans are not happy with you guys. They will be waiting for you at the arena, and please nobody hit them. Thank you. So that was the end of the speech, and he hung up, and we're all like, holy smokes, what's going on here? So you start leaning on the Swiss guys a little bit, like, what's really going on here? And they're like, don't worry about it, it happens, So we drive up to the arena, and they got the road blocked, and they got this sign stretched out across, and they have flares, and they got the flares lit, and they're throwing them at them, or not throwing them, but they're kind of, making gestures to the boss and stuff. And this sign said something that I probably can't say on air, but so they sat there, and they blocked the road for about 10 minutes, so we couldn't get to the arena, and they said their piece, and sure enough, we went in the back of the arena to unload all our gear and stuff. The fans all came back there, and they were probably 8 feet away from us with these flares yelling at us in foreign languages and stuff like that. So that was quite an experience, and definitely another chapter in the book there.
That sounds less than assuring for the owner to be like, hey, the fans are going to be insane, but please don't do anything to them when they might threaten you.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Whatever.
And then our coach at the time said, that's nothing. He goes, I was coaching in Italy a few years ago, and they lost in the playoffs, and he woke up the next morning, and his car was smoldering. Somebody lit it on fire. So I guess it could have been worse.
Gotta love it. Do you still stay in touch with many of the guys back in Europe at all?
The guys that I played with in Europe, more the the Canadians or Americans that I played with over there, I still keep in touch. And I was actually in a group text today with a few of them. So yeah, we stay in touch. We had a pretty special bond with guys over there, and some are still involved in the game. Some are moved on in the business world, but still fun to connect with those guys.
When you've signed NHL deals with like the AHL affiliates, what's kind of different between pursuing AHL free agency versus NHL, like a spot on the big club?
Paycheck, probably.
Yeah, I mean that's obvious. Yeah, but besides that, there has to be something.
You mean like to actually make the big team, or be on the minors, or?
Yeah, so just like I read that you signed a couple of deals just with like the minor league club. Is that right? Or, yeah. Okay,
yeah. So that was kind of towards the end of my career, and that kind of gets back to that conversation we had earlier about quite often NHL teams like to have some veteran guys at the AHL level to be captains and leaders and mentors for the young prospects coming in, and that was kind of my role. In the last couple of years of my career, the roster in LA. Jonathan Quick was there. Jonathan Bernier. There were our goalies. Alec Martinez, Teddy Purcell, Brian Boyle, Matt Olson. There was a lot of guys, probably 10 guys that went on to win Stanley Cups in LA and be part of that kind of dynasty they had there for 2 or 3 years. And, so that was a fun part to be involved with. And it was really nice to see those guys develop into NHL players and ultimately Stanley Cup champions. And even though obviously I wasn't playing and stuff like that, it was fun to kind of be on the outside of that whole run, looking in and seeing those guys do so well.
How much different, if at all, do you feel like maybe your career would be maybe in a more like modern NHL? Just because you said, boy, I was 5'9", and it was a big guys game, and now there's a lot of speed emphasis in the game.
Yeah, it's you can't do anything about it, but there's no question. I think my game would have translated better into today's world. There's no more. We used to back check, and instead of skating the back check, you called a water skiing, where you put your stick around the guy's waist and he'd just drag you so he couldn't get anywhere. So that's how guys back check back then. So it was hard to get separation, and obviously, anybody that does that nowadays is an automatic penalty. So I would have loved to have been, 12 years younger or whatever to play in post lockout, but it is what it is, and I had a lot of great experiences at the NHL level, AHL level, and the European experience as well. So I'm not going to sit here and complain. It is what it is. The game has changed, but certainly it would have been nice to be able to play in today's rules.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being a professional hockey player, I don't think you'd have a better angle to it at all. But, I mean, when you look back at your stops as a player, what kind of was the most special experience? Either playing that major junior in Brandon and the WJC to all being around the world as a pro player?
I really think I really probably enjoyed my experience in Philadelphia. I was always thankful for them. I thought that I got my first real experience with the Flyers, and probably least expected experience. Probably I didn't really. I maybe expected to get called up for a couple games, with some injuries and stuff. But I was 26 at the time. There was a guy, a centerman, that went down with an injury, and I went in there with the mindset like. I always felt like when I was younger in Calgary, I went up there, and when I played, I played not to make mistakes. And when you play that style of hockey, you become a non-factor in the game. So I kind of drilled it in my own head, like, you know what, I'm going to go out there and just do what I do. Play the same way I do in the American Hockey League. I'm an offensive player. I'm not going to be scared to make mistakes. And what's the worst they can do? Send me down. That's happened a few times already. So I'm just going to go out there and do what I do. And I knew that first game I got called up in Buffalo and played with the Flyers. I knew that I could belong. I felt like I played with a lot of confidence. I obviously surrounded by very good players. The Flyers were real strong at that time. And I felt like I belonged. And that was probably the first time I felt like I belonged, with those guys. And, so to answer your question, I always have a soft spot for Philadelphia because I think they gave me my first, real opportunity. And on the flip side of that first opportunity, I really took advantage of.
Do you take a real aggressive mindset to get the junior guys' confidence? I mean, feels like they could be more impressionable and they have a lot to win or lose from how they play right now. And it seems like even NHL players could be effective if they're not confident, trust their killer instinct,
Absolutely. I mean, confidence is so big. I mean, you can see it at the NHL level. You can see the best players in the world. Sometimes you see them on TV and they're talking about, I'm just not feeling it right now. I'm squeezing my stick. And, confidence is such a big thing. And for the young kids coming into, out of junior hockey to pro, if you don't have confidence and a little swagger without being over the top, it's a tough grind. And it took me a little while to understand that. And to be honest, it takes most guys, other than the high draft picks that maybe go right from junior to the NHL. But most guys get their taste of the American Hockey League and understand what it's like to play as a pro, and it's a it has to be an everyday thing. And I think for a young guy coming out of junior, you have to understand that it's it's an everyday commitment. Whether it be practice or the game.
What made it the right time for you, Marty, to move on from playing in the pros after the 2009-2010 season?
I always said if I could play to I'm 35, that I'd be real thrilled with that. And it just so happens that was 15 years. I started at 20 and played till I was 35. And I think that knee injury I touched on earlier during the 04-05 lockout really kind of took its toll on me. I lost half a step, and I was still able to have some successful seasons, in Europe and in the American Hockey League. But I just felt like I lost a step, and the game was speeding up at the same time. So I was kind of going the opposite way of everybody else. So being 35 and riding the bus and the minors and stuff like that. Another big part of it, I had a young family. My daughter was ready to start kindergarten, and we always talked about making sure our family had stability when the school years came along. I think that was important. Something my wife and I talked about quite a bit going through the process. So it just seemed like the right time to call it a day. I was really happy with my 15 years and proud of the things I accomplished, but the timing felt right to leave the game as a player, and I'm lucky the Toros came into Minot, and I still to this day have the opportunity to be involved in the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, when you're done playing it, why did you want to stay in the game somehow? And Toros coming around in 11-12 season, what made that the right spot?
I guess I was trying to figure out the next phase of my life, to be honest with you. I started a little training facility at a local gym. We had synthetic ice, some shooting lanes, and I was helping some kids, with training lessons and stuff like that. And it was fun, but at the same time, to provide for a family, it just didn't cut it. So, I was trying to figure out the next phase of my life, and sure enough, the junior hockey team came to town, the Toros, and I didn't know anything about it. To be honest with you, I never heard of the North American Hockey League before growing up in Canada, playing major, junior. I didn't know anything about it, and I was the assistant coach that first year, and I think I got hired in June, right before the draft, and needless to say, it was pretty much a disaster. We won 7 games that year, and anything that could have went wrong went wrong. And we talked about earlier with my days with the Brandon Wheat Kings, I really drew a lot from that very first year with the Wheat Kings when we won 11 games, just the growing pains, and they ended up naming me head coach, I think, in late February, early March, and had a complete rebuild, and I was able to surround myself with some good people that were passionate, and slowly but surely we were able to develop a winner here, and we're proud of the fact that we've made the playoffs every year after that disastrous first season. So a lot of hard work. It starts with our owner, Brad Porter, and works its way through, and we've been fortunate to have some pretty good players through here, and not only good players, but good people as well, and really become a community hockey team.
Yeah, you kind of knew what you had to do based on the year 1 to 2 in Brandon, and then translating to year 1 to 2 in Minot, pretty much, right?
Exactly. I mean, honestly, if I didn't have that experience in Brandon as a player, I don't know if I could have made it through, going into year 2 as a coach, just because it seemed like there was no way out of this rut, and Minot, to a lot of prospects, maybe isn't the biggest hockey hotbed. So to try to recruit anybody to come to Minot, was almost impossible. They didn't come out and say it, but you could almost feel that, them say, well, if it doesn't work out with the other 23 teams, I'll call you type thing. So we had a lot of work to do, and piece by piece, you rely on your networking, some people that you maybe played with or knew throughout the hockey playing days, and just piece by piece, we're able to bring some good players. And I think the first thing I did year 2 is went out and got a good goalie, an established goalie, and built the team around him. Gentleman by by the name of Tyler Parks, who's playing in the American Hockey League right now. He was the backbone for team second year, and then you have a little success, you get a commitment here, and a commitment, and then all of a sudden the people's ears are perking up a little bit and see some good things going on. So it took a long time, but I really am happy where the organization's at as far as being respected around the league. I think a lot of people want to throw the credit at me, but I'm quick to deflect it. We have a good group of people involved, like I said, starting at with Brad Porter, our owner, and our front office works extremely hard. I have my assistant GM is based out of Minneapolis. He does a lot of the recruiting. My assistant coach works really hard, and Shane Wagner, Wyatt Wazelenchuk, those are. And I've said all along, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and I've been able to surround myself with those guys, and they take it to another level.
As you were looking for that right hockey opportunity post-playing career to join a coaching staff or like a front office role, you talk about recruiting these players to this place, Minot, but how did you happen upon it? And when you didn't even first know a ton about the NAHL to begin with?
How did I end up at Minot?
Yeah.
So my hometown is an hour north of Minot here, right on the Canadian-U.S. border. So it's kind of like home. My wife is from Mohall, which is about 40 miles northwest of here. So it was actually kind of a freaky story. It was during the lockout in 04-05 when the NHL canceled the entire season. We used to have a cabin up north of Brandon at a national park called Clear Lake, and beautiful spot. We loved it up there. We actually went to a Brandon Wheat King hockey game. It was early November. We were driving home, and it was there was black ice on the road, and we were about 2 miles from our home, and going through a windy road on the highway, and I wasn't going fast, but we hit the shoulder, and in Canada they don't have pavement on the shoulders. It's just gravel, so we ended up rolling the vehicle 3 times and down a steep coulee, and my wife was 6 months pregnant, and we had her 9-month-old daughter in there too, and it really, really scared us. And we were really lucky to walk away from that. I really don't know how. Obviously somebody was watching over us. I know that particular night, my daughter was 9 months. She was in the back seat, and she was crying a lot. So my wife decided to ride in the back with her, and she sat right behind me. And the worst part of the damage on the whole vehicle when we rolled it was the passenger seat, and God forbid if she was sitting up there, it probably wouldn't have been very good. So somebody was definitely watching over us that night, and we just kind of said enough's enough. We knew that where we were living in Clear Lake wasn't a year-round place for us. It was more of a summer destination, and I just got my green card, which allowed me to live in the States. So we seemed to always be traveling back this way, whether it be to my folks or Andrea's folks, and we just said, enough's enough. We're done here. I think we put the house in the market the next week and set up shop in Minot. We've been here ever since.
Dang, I couldn't have predicted that answer from that question. So that's how you get based down here, and then you just see that the league's coming along, or what?
When we moved here, the team wasn't even thought of yet. I don't think. I think I did that training thing for a year or two, and was able to, wasn't real urgent that I needed to, maybe go find a job right away. So I was trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do here? And then the team came to town and thought, hey, this is kind of cool. I went down, I drove down to a Bismarck Bobcat game. I remember when the team announced they were coming to Minot, I went down with Jared Olson. We watched the game together and was quite impressed with the quality of hockey. And I thought, let's try this for a year. I was the assistant coach and see what goes on. And it was a trying year. Like I said, we only won 7 games, but learned a lot and learned a lot of what not to do. And here we are going into our 10th year, and we've done a pretty good thing, I think.
Absolutely, you guys have been competitive in the Central, that's for sure. Now you are the head coach. You're on ice level every single night, and then also you're in the GM's chair. what are some advantages and challenges to having both of those positions when you build a hockey team?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm surrounded by good people in Wags and Waz and Chris Lonke, so I'm one to really bounce things off of everybody. It's not just me making all the calls. We usually discuss everything as a group, and there's some tough decisions that have to be made along the way. And the toughest thing for me is cutting a kid or trading a kid, especially as you get to know them, because you feel for them. You put your player's hat on. I've been in that chair. I've been in that situation on occasions. It's not fun, and it's certainly not fun from a managerial standpoint to sit there and tell the kid that he's getting cut, and you basically got to go find somewhere else to play. So that's the hardest part for me is that tugging at the heartstrings and telling kids bad news, and because we try to get, like I said, not only good hockey players, really good kids in here as well. So when you get to know them, realize what their character is about, that's to me the hardest part of the job. And obviously on the flip side of that, the most rewarding part of the job is to see kids do well and get opportunities to play Division I college. And now we have a number of guys that are, earning a paycheck playing the game.
Now, the highest point of success this franchise has had was the end of 17-18. You guys go all the way to the Robertson Cup final. What made that team capable of a run like that?
It was tough. I think we probably underachieved a little bit throughout the regular season. I think we had a better team than what our record was, and we were struggling to make the playoffs. And it just kind of goes back to hockey being such a funny game. I think the biggest thing you try to teach your players is on playoff time you just can't turn it on like a light switch. Sure enough, that's kind of what we did. I thought we maybe underachieved during the regular season. The one good thing about being, battling for that fourth and final playoff spot is we were kind of in playoff mode leading up to, the playoffs actually started. I think we, went 7-3 our last 10 games or something like that, just because we had that urgency to get into the playoffs. So I think we were kind of in playoff mode, before the playoffs started. And, it was just, we talked about confidence earlier, and seeing some guys step up. It's fun to go to the rink in the playoffs. You're in your shorts, and it's just a magical time of year, and our guys really, came even closer together, and it was really fun. I put that right up there with some of my, best playing experiences, to see those kids come together and accomplish something. We were one goal away from winning the whole thing, being the 16th seed out of 16 going into the playoffs. So it was an amazing story, at the same time heartbreaking to get so close and come up one goal short.
And the way this season was going, I mean, we've seen how crazy the Central Division has been year in and year out. I know it's a cliche, but it just keeps on happening. So you guys definitely could have been in that sort of a situation where you could have had playoff time early, with maybe the definite playoff seed not being sealed up for most of this season. First, just how difficult was it for you guys to have to stop the season like this? And ultimately, where could this team have gone if you would have been able to finish things?
Well, the first part of your question was real difficult. There's a lot of work that goes into, building a hockey team, and a lot of work to, our front office does to making the show a great experience for our fans. So, kind of the pinnacle of that is the playoffs, and to have that kind of pulled away was really stung. I felt really bad for our players, the work that they put in, especially our 20-year-old guys that, usually in hockey you have a say in when you go out, right? And it usually results in winning or losing the playoffs. And in this case, they didn't have a say in the matter. And that's, to me, I felt really bad for the kids, like I said, especially our 20-year-olds, to just have to be told that the season's over, it's canceled. Sorry, and obviously we didn't say it like that, but that's kind of what it was. And to see the kids and tears in their eyes and stuff like that, they're a real tight knit group, and I see a lot of similarities between the 17-18 team and this team. We had a lot of depth. We could score. We had a good goalie, and I thought our young defense core was really playing a lot better. The month before the season ended, so there was a lot to be optimistic about. Obviously, we had a lot of tough competition to try to get through to get back to the Robertson Cup, but I think any coach could sit here in our division and say, it was kind of up for grabs, and we were obviously one of the 4, even 5 teams in that conversation that could have made a run at it.
And obviously, you had a handful of games left in the regular season. You don't have the body of work of the playoffs to prove what you guys could have had to really put a bow on this year. Just with that in mind, I mean, how clear of a roadmap do you guys really have to know what you need going into this next season to make sure that you can hopefully win the division or get to that Robertson Cup final level, or at least like final site level next season?
I think if this happened a year ago, I think I'd be really, really stressed out. I think we only had 5 guys returning from last year's team, and if that happened, when we had 5 guys returning this fall, I think I'd be really, really nervous. I think on paper we can return about 16 or 18 guys or something like that, and obviously there's a lot of things that we're unclear about as far as returning players, but we can return a lot. So I think we feel good about where the team was left off in the spring here. We have a lot of positives to build on, and I think the guys are going to be hungry and they're coming back. Obviously their season didn't end the way we wanted to. It's definitely nobody's fault, but I think there's a lot for the guys to come back in the fall and be hungry for.
You've given a lot of credit to the players that the Taros have been able to have in the franchise's history, guys that have gone on to get paychecks playing hockey, But after his year here, Kyler Clevin, I mean, what kind of player do you guys have with him?
Well, I think he's one of the best that we've seen come through here, to come in as a rookie and have success at this level is not easy. I mean, our division in particular, it's hard to put points up and hard to score goals in. And Kyler was just, I think the second half of the year, he was a dominant player. Not only him, but his whole line, and Jay Buchholz and Dan Russell, they were exceptional. And for Kyler in particular, even though he's got a year of junior hockey left, it was, on a personal level with the season coming to an end the way it did, it was tough for a kid like that because he had a lot of colleges on him. And, a lot of them were probably getting ready to pull the trigger, and then all of a sudden, the league just stopped and the season was over. So it's certainly not back to the drawing board for him. I think he's got some school visits lined up, but for me, it would have been real nice for Kyler to continue to prove himself down the home stretch of the season and into the playoffs. I think that he really would have opened some eyes and probably sealed up his D1 commitment. He'll be a Division I hockey player, there's no question about it, and that was probably coming even sooner than we think. But for me, if I could have dreamt it up perfectly, it would have been him continuing on doing what he was doing and dominating night in, night out, and getting that commitment during a great playoff run. But unfortunately, that never happened. Like I said, he'll be a Division I hockey player. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of where he's going to end up and win.
Hopefully, he's not one of the only Taros to come back and still be able to solidify that college standing. The COVID-19 season notwithstanding, anyway. And Coach, speaking of getting things done, how's the basement coming along?
Well, you know what, you've been trying to get me to finish it up for a while, so we've done quite a bit of work, and actually I've kind of surprised myself. I've become more of a handyman than I've ever thought I could be. So we're finishing along. I know you talked about doing it around my man cave. I got a few things up in the room over there, ping pong table and some jerseys, but I still have kind of a wall that I want to get done with some logos of the teams I played on and some pictures, that I've been able to collect over the years. So it's coming along okay.
Yeah, that's for sure. The Murray Man Cave is definitely the right backdrop once we do get that TV profile done, but I think we got a good start here, especially with the podcast interview, Coach Murray, and we'll be over there for the Marty Hall of Fame if and whenever it gets completed, okay?
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully it'll be done sooner than later.